At New Year's dinner, my father-in-law splashed wine in my face. One phone call ruined everything. What would you do if your own father-in-law, right at the New Year's dinner table, hurled a glass of wine directly into your face, and your wife's sister cheered him on, calling you a filthy pig? My name is Connor Harrison, and that night, something inside me didn't just snap. It clicked into a terrifyingly cold, precise clarity. They thought they were humiliating me, but they had just signed their own financial death warrant. The crystal wine glass did shatter against the hardwood floor. Red liquid bled across the oak like blood. But that wasn't what truly broke that night.
No.
It was the wine that had just drenched my face. It was dripping from my hair, staining my crisp white dress shirt, stinging my eyes. And there he stood, Richard Montgomery, my father-in-law, at the head of his opulent dining table, an empty glass in his hand, pure, unadulterated contempt in his eyes. Beside him, Jessica, my wife's younger sister, was practically convulsing with laughter. "Thanks, Dad," she choked out between gasps. "Maybe that'll teach him some respect." Filthy pig. My hands clenched the chair beneath me. A primal rage roared through me, but I forced myself to be still. "Slow down, Connor." The entire Montgomery family was watching, a tableau of their dysfunctional power dynamics. Vanessa, my wife, sat frozen beside me, her face a mask I couldn't read. Patricia, her mother, had her hand clapped over her mouth. Was it shock? Or was it suppressed amusement? Her brother, Tyler, just stared intently at his plate, probably wishing the floor would swallow him whole. I stood up. Slowly. The room went absolutely silent, save for Jessica's giggles, which finally died down. My fingers, incredibly, were steady. Despite the inferno inside, my movements were precise. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a contact I had hoped, prayed, I'd never have to use in a family setting like this. I pressed call. "Davies," I said, my voice unnervingly calm when the line connected. "It's time. Execute everything we discussed." Then I hung up. The silence in that room was deafening. Even Jessica was wide-eyed now. They had no idea. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no clue what I'd built, what I controlled, what I was about to take away from them. But oh, they were about to find out. My name is Connor Harrison. I'm 42. Up until that New Year's Eve dinner, most people would have called me quiet, unassuming. A man who worked in finance. But quiet doesn't mean weak. Unassuming doesn't mean powerless. I'd spent the last 15 years building an empire bigger than anything the Montgomerys could possibly comprehend. And I'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact moment. The Montgomerys, they never truly respected me. Not for 1 second. Not since the day I married Vanessa 8 years ago. To them, I was just the son-in-law without old money. Without the right pedigree. I didn't belong in their gilded cage of country clubs, polo matches, and charity galas. Richard, my esteemed father-in-law, had made his fortune in commercial real estate back in the 80s. He bought cheap, developed, rode the wave of urban renewal. He always prided himself on being self-made. Which, honestly, made his disdain for me all the more ironic. Connor works in finance. He'd sneer to people at parties, putting so much emphasis on the word finance that it sounded like a dirty, unspeakable disease. The truth? He understood perfectly what I did. He just couldn't stomach the fact that I had become more successful than him, and I'd done it all without his help or his connections. I ran a private equity fund. We specialized in distressed assets, failing commercial properties, companies teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, developments that couldn't secure financing. I'd buy them for pennies on the dollar, restructure them, and either turn them hugely profitable or flip them for massive gains. My fund managed north of $300 million. My personal net worth? Around $70 million. But to the Montgomerys? I was still just quiet Connor. Vanessa, my wife, she knew the truth. She'd seen the bank statements, signed the tax returns. She knew exactly how successful I was. But she never, ever corrected her family's assumptions. Looking back now, that should have been the first glaring warning sign. The insults, they started subtly. Small, insidious little jokes about my clothes. Tyler, Vanessa's brother, would brag incessantly about his prestigious law firm, always in a way that subtly implied my work was somehow less legitimate. Patricia, her mother, would casually ask when we were planning to buy a bigger house, as if our perfectly lovely four-bedroom colonial wasn't enough. But Jessica? She was the absolute worst. She'd married Bradley Cortland, a hedge fund manager who, coincidentally, loved to talk about his bonuses at dinner. Bradley's firm projects 30% returns this year, she'd announce, always looking directly at me, a smirk playing on her lips. What kind of returns does your little fund get, Connor? I'd just smile. Change the subject. Let them think what they wanted. What was the point in telling them that my little fund had averaged a staggering 42% returns over the past decade?
No.
There was simply no point in correcting their narrative. The Montgomerys weren't interested in facts that contradicted the story they'd already written about me. Vanessa. She had been so different when we first met. A brilliant curator at a contemporary art gallery. Independent.
Passionate.
I fell completely in love with her wit, her insatiable curiosity, the way she could talk about abstract expressionism or behavioral economics with equal ease. But slowly, subtly, she drifted. She drifted right back into her family's toxic orbit. She started attending more of their events. She began adopting their condescending attitudes. And, eventually, she started to look at me the way they did. Then, 6 months before that fateful New Year's dinner, things changed definitively. She started taking calls in other rooms, joining book clubs that conveniently lasted until midnight. Her nail appointments and hair coloring became excessive. I knew the signs. I felt it in my gut. I hired a private investigator, Marcus Fleming, a former FBI agent who ran a discreet firm. Within 2 weeks, he had everything: photographs, videos, phone records, text messages. Vanessa was having a full-blown affair with Jackson Sinclair, a gallery owner who'd been pursuing her for over a year. They met at his downtown loft 3 times a week. Their messages, oh God, they were explicit. And they were filled with pure, unadulterated mockery of me. Connor has no idea, one read. He's so clueless. I sat in my office, reading those words, and felt something cold, something utterly chilling, settle deep in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak, not really. It was clarity. An awful, crystalline clarity. The woman I married, the one I thought I knew, she didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. What remained was just another Montgomery. One who simply wanted an upgrade. And that's when I started planning Richard's commercial empire. It wasn't nearly as solid as it looked to the outside world. I'd been tracking his properties for years, just out of professional habit, 12 properties in the metro area. Mortgages coming due. Underoccupied buildings bleeding cash. His flagship tenant's lease? Expiring in just 6 months. I quietly started positioning my pieces on the board. I approached Richard's largest tenant, through a third party of course, and offered them much better terms in a building my fund already owned. Then I spoke with the banks holding his mortgages. I casually expressed my interest in buying those notes at a discount should he, default. I didn't stop there. I gathered everything I possibly could on every family asset. Tyler's struggling law firm. Bradley's wildly underperforming hedge fund. Even Patricia's shockingly high credit card debt. By New Year's Eve, I had a complete, meticulously detailed picture of their entire, fragile financial house. They were standing on quicksand, and they had no idea. The dinner itself started normally. As normal as a Montgomery dinner could get anyway. Fancy decorations, crystals shimmering everywhere, a catered meal. Richard, naturally, held court. Tyler exaggerated some minor legal victory. Jessica and Bradley, as always, competed to see who'd had the more extravagant vacation. I just ate quietly. My usual role, the polite, unassuming son-in-law who never quite measured up. Then, halfway through the main course, Richard mentioned a property. The Hendricks Warehouse Complex. He accused my firm of insulting an old relationship by offering 30% below market value. I replied calmly. We offer what the analysis supports, Richard. Numbers speak for themselves. Jessica, already quite drunk on wine and pure, unadulterated cruelty, immediately jumped in. Connor doesn't understand how real business works, she sneered, looking around at everyone. Bradley says funds like his are vultures. I kept my voice level, measured. We provide liquidity. We save jobs. We create value. That's when Richard completely snapped. He stood up and raged. How dare you, he boomed. Insult me in my own home, in front of my family. He then turned to Vanessa. Vanessa. And instead of defending me, instead of even looking at me, she said, with such cold detachment it physically stung, Connor, maybe we should leave. As if I was the problem. As if I had instigated this. I started to walk towards Richard. Before I could even open my mouth, he did it. He flung the wine straight into my face. The red liquid hit me like a slap. Jessica, God, she just laughed, delighted. Maybe that'll teach him some respect. Filthy pig, she shrieked. But beneath the hot, searing rage, something else was happening. A cold, calculating mechanism clicked into place. They had given me exactly what I needed. Without another word, I pulled out my phone. And I called Davies. Execute everything, I said. Connor, what's happening? Vanessa finally asked, her voice barely a whisper, as I hung up. I looked at her. I'm done, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I'm filing for divorce. I'm filing assault charges against Richard. And I'm freezing all marital assets. Then I showed them my phone. I had been recording the entire ugly scene. Richard couldn't deny a single word. In our state, as a participant, I could legally record the conversation. No problem. Davies, my attorney, was already filing motions to freeze assets and moving to foreclose on 3 of Richard's properties. I own the mortgage notes, I told them, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. Bought them months ago. Payments are due. And they're past due. The room erupted.
Panic.
Sheer, unadulterated panic. But I wasn't finished. Tyler, I said, turning to him, your firm is about to lose the Hendricks account. Then to Jessica, you might want to ask Bradley about the redemption requests his fund has been getting lately. And finally, to Patricia, maybe you should ask Richard about the second mortgage on this very house. Their faces went white. Bradley looked physically sick. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, and this time, it was genuine shock. You're a monster, Vanessa whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Disgust? I met her gaze. I'm someone, I said, each word deliberate, who's tired of being treated like nothing by people who are nothing. I walked to the door, the red wine still dripping from my hair. At the threshold, I paused. I turned back to face the stunned, silent family. Happy New Year, everyone, I said, my voice as silken steel. I hope it's everything you deserve. The next 72 hours? Absolute chaos. Davies moved like a freight train. Vanessa received divorce papers on January 1st. Richard got his foreclosure notices on January 2nd. Tyler's firm was officially notified that the Hendricks account was gone on January 3rd. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Vanessa called 16 times the first day alone. Tyler tried to negotiate. Patricia begged. I didn't answer a single call. The PI's detailed report on Vanessa's affair went straight to Davies. In our state, adultery significantly impacts asset division. Vanessa wouldn't be walking away with half. She'd be lucky to get 20%. The actual foreclosure process took months, sure, but the damage to Richard's reputation was immediate. Lenders started calling notes due. Tenants, hearing the whispers, began looking for other spaces. His empire began to crumble, brick by fragile brick. I felt no gloating, no joy. Just a cold, undeniable sense of justice. A week later, Vanessa finally got through on a number she must have dug up. Connor, please, she pleaded. We need to talk. I told her there was nothing left to talk about. I knew everything. About Jackson. I had the photos, the videos, the messages. She tried to suggest counseling. I shut it down. It was never about Jackson, Vanessa, I told her, my voice weary. It was about who you became. You let your family treat me like trash. You agreed with them. You became one of them. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. Vanessa walked away with $200,000 and a car. Given my net worth, I think she'd expected significantly more. At the final hearing, she looked smaller, diminished. As if that ingrained Montgomery confidence had been stripped bare. She tried to approach me, tried to say something, but I just walked past her without a single word. There was nothing left to say. A year later, I was in my brand new office, overlooking the city's skyline I'd helped shape. My fund had grown to over $400 million. I was negotiating more deals, bigger deals, than ever before. My assistant announced a visitor, Amanda Richardson, a curator from the Contemporary Art Museum. She walked in with this quiet confidence, the kind of woman who just knew what she wanted. We talked for an hour, about art, about urban development, about meaning. I ended up committing $5 million to the museum's expansion. And I asked her to dinner.
She said yes.
Amanda. She kept her apartment. She fiercely guarded her independence. She loved me because she wanted to, not because she needed to. And that, right there, was the monumental difference. 2 years after that New Year's Eve, the wine-throwing incident that changed everything, Amanda and I hosted our own New Year's party at my penthouse. At midnight, she pulled me onto the balcony, the city sparkling below us. "I love that you know your worth," she said, her eyes shining. "You don't need anyone to validate you." And in that moment, I realized the Montgomerys, in their own twisted way, had taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. Their relentless attempts to make me feel small had, ironically, taught me to stop seeking approval from the wrong people. The best revenge, I understood, wasn't destroying them. The best revenge was building a life so good, so fulfilling, so undeniably mine, that they couldn't even touch it. Richard thought, throwing wine in my face put me in my place. What he actually did, in a strange, messed-up way, was set me free. For that, I suppose, I should probably thank him. So, what about you? Have you ever had that moment? That breaking point where someone's disrespect, their cruelty, actually pushed you towards something better, something truly extraordinary? I really want to know. Tell me your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, if you felt that shift, that clarity, then please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Until next time, remember, sometimes the people who treat you the worst teach you the best lessons about who you are and what you truly deserve.